It was just sunscreen on my back. Until I realized the truth wasn't on my skin. It was buried deep inside everything I'd been trying to forget. What began as a straightforward family outing, a joyful meal to celebrate Jack's 20th birthday, transformed into an entirely unexpected affair. As usual, my husband was deeply engrossed in his work while I busied myself with the dishes and baked pies, envisioning a day filled with laughter and warmth. I frequently found myself pondering the moment when the facade of our existence, which appeared to be thriving, began to show signs of wear, much like aged furniture that is unraveling at its joints. Those who resided in close proximity and were familiar with us perceived our family as exemplary, our home as picturesque, and our children as consistently cheerful and impeccably tidy. Yet, I stood alone, the sole bearer of knowledge regarding the malevolence that had infiltrated this seemingly secure and cozy realm. Will perpetually sought to engage in something, rendering him a mere specter lost within the tumult of his office existence, while I gradually succumbed to a profound sense of solitude. The scorching sun caressed my skin that day at the beach, amplifying my sense of solitude and emptiness. Jack and I were enjoying ourselves, tossing a ball back and forth, reminiscing about amusing memories. For just a fleeting moment, I averted my gaze, and as he helped me apply sunscreen, I noticed how much he had grown. No longer the boy I remembered. What initially appeared to be a straightforward and compassionate gesture gradually unraveled into a web of complexity as the hours unfolded. My thoughts were cluttered with shattered dreams, and it dawned on me that Jack was the only one who truly seemed to care how I was feeling lately. His careless yet kind words and actions enveloped me in a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. A part of me felt neglected by Will for so long that I'd forgotten what being noticed felt like. It was in that instant that I understood Jack was occupying the void my husband had created. Thoughts swirled in my mind, pondering the implications this could hold for us. However, the family gathering I had meticulously orchestrated swiftly devolved into a tense affair. As we lounged on the sand, our laughter mingled with the gentle whispers of the breeze, while the sounds of others reveling faded softly into the distance. He sensed that I was drifting further away, as if an internal tide had washed away all traces of joy. The oppressive silence compelled me to confront a stark reality. The fire I had been seeking had long since extinguished. Will returned home, weary and disinterested. He offered no greeting, inquired not about my day, nor did he exhibit any concern for his son. His absence was keenly felt. As I lingered at the kitchen table, its once gentle surface had lost its softness. It was overwhelming. I had settled into the fabric of his existence. It was a matter he could effortlessly dismiss while I lingered before the vacant desk. My thoughts drifted to faded, unclean recollections. I felt a surge of anger towards myself for allowing circumstances to unfold as they did. The essence of the woman I once was eludes my memory. The woman, proud of her family, seemed to me a mere echo of her former self, yearning to be acknowledged, to hold significance, to truly feel valued. As I observed Jack absorbing every word that evening, it dawned on me that he reminded me of a time when life felt vivid and emotionally alive. His luminous, youthful gaze evoked memories of the hope and trust that once filled my heart. Yet in an instant the world transformed. I was caught off guard by the sudden gesture, gentle and unspoken, yet filled with care. When our gazes intertwined, his eyes brimmed with a profound sensitivity. I had never experienced such feelings from a stranger before. What should I express? In that instant, everything transformed. The weight of solitude presses down, a longing to shed the facade that has become too burdensome to maintain. Everything emerged into the light. A silent storm swept through me, unveiling hidden truths. For an extended period, I had remained in the shadows. It was as if I had turned against my own essence when the blow landed. It felt as though I had collided with my own essence. As I stood once more upon the shore, encircled by a throng of faces, it dawned on me that I had constructed my own prison and must summon the courage to break free. My emotions were unraveling, fragmenting my very being. Though not romantic, The emotional weight of our bond was almost too much to carry. Jack's expression shifted from amusement to bewilderment as my gaze met his. In that moment, I realized we stood on the brink of something monumental, a discovery that would resolve all my uncertainties, leaving me with a singular, undeniable truth that would linger endlessly. How can I feel so deeply for someone who simply reminded me of what I'd lost? Our solitude and aspiration were intertwined, yet they resided on separate shores. The barrier separating us seemed on the verge of crumbling, just as a tide of fear and uncertainty washed over me. And with every fleeting moment, I came to understand that it was not love. A melancholic awareness lingered, an unyielding passage of time marked by losses that clung to me, refusing to fade away. On a desolate stretch of shoreline, I found myself caught in the tumultuous grip of love and anger. Will embodied the shadows of my past, whereas Jack represented my beacon of hope. They never truly belonged to me, so how could I possibly move on? Summer days once evoked a sense of tranquility, yet this time their light seemed to whisper a different story. The sea seemed to beckon to us from the window, while the sun poured its golden light inside. Yet, the notion of Will's perpetual absence cast a shadow over my heart, extinguishing any flicker of joy I might have felt. He consistently prioritized his work over us, and each time it pierced my heart like a knife, I swiftly dismissed the thought and departed with Jack, the sole person still willing to share these fleeting moments with me. As we journeyed toward the beach, I found myself reflecting on how much Jack had matured. He appeared to be adrift in his own realm, seated in the passenger seat, headphones enveloping his ears, gazing out the window. The realization washed over me like a tidal surge. If I dared to blink, he might vanish forever. The sensation was a curious blend of fear and an unexpected liberation. As these reflections lingered, I recalled the moments when he was younger, his tiny hand resting in mine. The sound of his laughter resonated throughout the room. Upon our arrival, it was as if we had collectively exhaled a long-held breath, a release of tension that had been building within us. Jack assisted me in carrying the bags to a serene location by the water, which brought me a sense of comfort. I laid the towels upon the sun-kissed sand as he arranged the umbrella, evoking memories of his childhood innocence. As I observed his transformation, a desire to engage him in conversation stirred within me, compelling me to uncover the thoughts and feelings swirling within him. I remained silent, simply stretching out on the towel, allowing the sun to envelop me like a well-worn pillow. I contemplated the suntan oil while attempting to find my composure. Jack's hesitation was palpable when I sought his assistance. It seemed as though he yearned to escape the predicament. A sense of constriction enveloped my chest as he finally acquiesced. It took me by surprise when he reached out, his hands now bearing the weight of maturity, no longer the innocent touch of childhood. They moved with a gentle touch, each action imbued with tenderness. This seemingly ordinary moment struck me with an intensity one couldn't comprehend, causing my body to tremble in a manner I had never experienced before. Jack methodically applied the oil, his hands gliding with a contemplative grace, as if pondering his next move. His touch resonated with a rhythmic pulse, and I surrendered to the darkness behind my eyelids. A sensation washed over me, one I realized I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. The sensation of his hands transported me back to that moment when I first cradled him, a fragile infant in my arms. The recollection stood in stark contrast to the emotions surging within me at that very moment. As he reached out instinctively, I gently stepped back, aware of how fragile the moment had become. A tempest seemed to materialize from the depths of the unknown, catching me unprepared and bewildered. I attempted to voice a plea for him to cease, yet no words emerged. Though I sought solace in the quiet, I reminded myself that it was merely a gesture of kindness. Yet, it felt as though the world around me transformed with each passing moment. He lingered with his hands near the edge of the towel, uncertainty etched across his face, as if caught in a moment of indecision. I could have pulled away, but I chose to reassure him gently, as a mother would. Those words lingered in the atmosphere, a verdict that seemed immutable. In that moment, silence enveloped us, and I sensed myself descending further into my own depths, with his touch being the sole connection that remained. I shut my eyes, surrendering to the enchantment of that quiet moment as it wove a delicate veil of calm around me. It was a realm I longed to remain in. It became clear we were both seeking comfort in each other, but I knew we had to find healthier ways to heal. An aura of awe and authenticity. It was evident to us both that this was no ordinary moment. It was an innovative approach to expressing emotions that remained unspoken. In that instant, I understood that his presence conveyed something far deeper than words. They were currents of an unnameable emotion that intertwined. With healing, a sense of lightness intertwined with madness enveloped me as a powerful yearning ripped through my very core. My lips were sealed in a firm embrace. That longing crystallized when my mind fell silent. Only the sound of our breathing together remained, a fragile thread in the stillness. In the stillness, I opened my eyes and gazed up at him. In that fleeting moment, all else faded into insignificance. We found ourselves on this infinite stretch of sand, isolated from the world around us. In this instance, the world's rules held no significance. In that fleeting instant, I sensed an entire universe of possibilities contained within. Each moment brimmed with those elusive emotions that are frequently obscured by the monotony of everyday life. In that moment, I yearned to freeze time, to ensure that the barrier separating us remained unyielding, allowing our souls and hearts to remain forever intertwined. This beach picnic was our hidden sanctuary. Even silence held significance, and words were unnecessary between us. For a fleeting moment, my worries and fears dissipated, leaving behind a fragile bond that tethered us together. We navigated an infinite expanse of feelings, akin to two vessels searching for refuge from a tempest. This illustrates that emotions can occasionally transcend the limits of language. In the stillness of our shared existence, I realized we were struggling souls, each reaching for light, unaware of how easily it could burn. Unbeknownst to me, time slipped away swiftly as the sun descended, casting elongated shadows across the sandy shore. Inhaling the crisp, invigorating scent of the ocean, I surrendered to a tranquil stillness. It resembled a restoration, a reprieve from the monotonous, threadbare existence that had settled in. Yet, the moment had arrived to return home, and with it emerged a haunting dread, creeping upon me like an unrelenting chill that refused to dissipate. As Jack and I settled into the car, an undeniable sense washed over me, as if fate had already set its course. As we navigated through the streets, my mind drifted into a labyrinth of contemplation, seeking refuge from the relentless anguish that gnawed at the very core of my being. With every rotation of the wheels, the delicate facade I had constructed around myself began to contract, as though an ominous presence awaited us at home. Upon his arrival, I found myself retreating into my confined existence, enveloped by the indifference that Will had fostered through his constant absence. Spoke aloud during the task, as though the house were empty of all but oneself. He appeared to be ensnared in his own private realm. The sound of his footsteps echoed softly in the kitchen as he prepared dinner, yet it was evident that his mind wandered elsewhere. Each time he averted his gaze, the fury simmering within me grew more difficult to contain. "Will, are you feeling hungry once more?" Thus, I aimed to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Inquired whether his smile was insincere and fleeting. He offered a slight nod, his gaze lingering on the cabinets as he searched for something to occupy his evening. As I reclined in bed that night, my thoughts were consumed by Jack. His gaze, his presence, and his unwavering focus. Everything blurred the boundaries of what once felt familiar. I endeavored to banish those thoughts, yet they persisted, returning time and again. I recognized the necessity to pause and compel myself into silence, yet a shadowy aspect of my being resisted the urge. It lacked the connection and care I once received from Will. With each passing day, Jack grew increasingly silent. His demeanor, unspoken yet more revealing than any words he could muster, lingered in the air like a simmering pot, filling the living room with an unnameable tension. His gaze sharpened, unwavering as it remained fixed on me. One evening, as I sat engrossed in the television, I felt his gaze fixed upon me, unwavering and intense. I did not turn it away. Instead, I allowed it to unfold, resulting in a quiet connection between us. An unspoken connection, profound and palpable, yet beyond the reach of language. The house was suffused with warmth over the weekend. We departed once more, leaving only Jack and me behind. The yearning to return to the beach eludes my understanding. The beach beckoned to me, a strong pull that I couldn't resist. Perhaps I was seeking an escape from the confines of the stuffy house, or maybe I clung to the hope that the fresh air would grant me clarity of thought. The atmosphere in the car was undeniably charged as we made our way down the road. Jack sat quietly, headphones enveloping his ears, as he gazed out the window. A sensation gripped me from within, compelling me to confront the reality of what was unfolding between us. The morning unfolded with a serene tranquility, enveloping the world in a gentle embrace. While I prepared breakfast in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee intertwined with the scent of warm, toasted bread, as I reflected on how a smile inevitably crept across my face. On numerous occasions, Will had cast a fleeting glance in my direction before dashing out the door. The rhythmic cadence of our existence was palpable, our mornings ticking away like a well-wound clock, until he approached me and pressed his lips gently against my cheek. For a fleeting instant, his presence enveloped me like the gentle embrace of early spring sunlight, yet all too soon, he was departing, retreating to his monotonous, work-focused existence. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the stairs, followed by the abrupt slam of the door, leaving me solitary in the sunlit, tranquil house. As always, Jack glided into the kitchen, nearly silent, like a specter in the soft glow of dawn. He stood by the window, utterly still, his gaze fixed on the world beyond. I gazed at him and noticed his eyes were locked onto me, much like they were at the beach, where he appeared to be devoid of any thoughts beyond that moment. I realized we were struggling souls, each reaching for light, unaware of how easily it could burn. The heat enveloped me, and his breath lingered close, a soft reminder of how love and warmth could consume entirely. Everything left me in awe of the intensity of the moment, and I attempted to halt him with a whispered word. Yet, before I could utter another word, he drew nearer, and a rush of fear and exhilaration surged within me, compelling me to escape. I began, yet he interrupted me. He leaned in, and I turned away, my breath catching in the realization of how fragile this moment truly was. I shattered every convention and ventured into the familiar during those fleeting instants. The day stretched endlessly, and I found myself caught in a tempest, crossing a threshold within myself that was never intended to be breached. I realized then that this was not a fleeting error, but rather a burdensome weight that would only grow more oppressive with each passing moment. I found myself teetering on the brink of my own reality, unable to escape the weight of the shame that bore down upon me. His gaze held me captive, and the subtle gestures of affection stirred within me a potent mix of yearning and regret. Even so, it still felt as though we were teetering on the brink of a chasm. It was at that moment I understood that a significant transformation had taken place within me. We shared a fragile closeness that defied explanation, yet it resonated with a need for healing and connection. As he reached out gently, the walls I had meticulously constructed began to crack, allowing the emotions I had long suppressed to surface. I found myself questioning whether I had erred in some way, for I had allowed emotional distance and pain to distort the simplicity of my world. I had ignored my own needs for too long, burying them beneath obligations and the weight of habit. Perhaps this moment wasn't about him at all, but about a woman rediscovering her ability to feel. The house remained quiet, a stillness that echoed with unspoken realizations. I stood in the kitchen staring at nothing, letting my thoughts settle like dust in morning light. Everything was the same, and yet everything had shifted inside me. Jack remained in the living room, reading quietly, his presence steady, unintrusive. It was comforting, familiar in a way that didn't ask questions. I watched him from the hallway for a moment, trying to place the emotion that had taken root in me. It wasn't romance. It wasn't confusion. It was loneliness, finally recognized. I stepped outside for air, the cool breeze whispering against my skin like the voice of reason. Across the yard, wind stirred the trees, and I let myself breathe deeply. A part of me knew this moment would pass, had to pass. Not everything aching inside deserved to be answered. Some aches simply needed to be acknowledged and released. Later that evening, we had dinner in near silence. Will remained at the office, sending a short message about working late.
I didn't respond.
I just watched the candlelight flicker over Jack's thoughtful face as he quietly offered to do the dishes. I nodded and whispered thank you. That night, alone in my room, I wept, not out of shame or confusion or even grief, but because I had finally looked at my reflection without flinching. I saw who I was, who I had become, and who I still had time to be. No line had been crossed, but a boundary inside me had finally been found and drawn with clarity.